Diving in now, Sean, to some of the other teams and how things played out for them. I'll let you take it away, but there's some interesting builds in it. And again, what I really like about doing drafts on different platforms is, and same as doing different drafts in different leagues, is seeing how to work some of the roster construction out, some of the strategy element of it. And in this, it was no different, with a number of teams taking different approaches. But what were some of the key standouts for you as we look back on the draft board after the draft is all said and done?
Yeah, this was a really fun draft to go through because managers adopted a variety of strategies, several of which we know can be effective. We've mentioned the Underdog roster explorer tools that will be out shortly, and they demonstrate that there are a variety of ways that you can play Underdog. And then you throw the Superflex element in as well, which really shakes up those first 2 or 3 rounds, and you have that additional sort of wild card, and it makes this very, very fun. But one of the things that we saw some wide receiver heavy teams. We saw some balanced teams. We see some QB heavy teams. We'll start with a couple of the wide receiver heavy teams here. There was one drafted out of the 107 and another out of the 108. Out of the 107, we get a cool team here that starts with Russell Wilson, and then the other 2 QBs are Justin Fields and Carson Wentz. Wilson, someone we do like, and he has this great situation with the Denver Broncos. It gives you a sense of just how tough it can be in Superflex if you get one of those picks outside of the top 5 or 6, because it seems to me like there's a pretty big tier break between the players that we had a shot at the 104 and Wilson as your first round pick at 107. But then we get this team that's very wide receiver heavy and has a lot of our favorite guys, especially early, where it has Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, Jerry Jeudy, and then some slightly more veteran receivers later, Darnell Mooney, but then Brandon Cooks and Tyler Lockett kind of to bring that home. DeAndre Swift, the only running back drafted in the first 11 rounds, and then also a couple of the tight ends that we really like on this roster in Albert O and Gerald Everett. And then Colm, out of the 108, we have a team that starts with Joe Burrow and then has Tua, Daniel Jones, and Malik Willis as the remaining quarterbacks here. So not as much confidence maybe in Tua and Jones. So does select Willis, gets that potentially elite rookie QB, uses the 4 picks at quarterback, which is a little bit more challenging if you've used that first round pick on Joe Burrow. But then a very fun team where you have Jamar Chase, DeAndre Hopkins, Terry McLaurin, Brandon Ayuk, Gallup, and then Christian Watson, an interesting rookie wide receiver late. A lot of red flags with Watson at the same time. This just unbelievable athletic profile, and the likelihood, it seems at this point, that one gutsy team will take a risk on him in the first round. And you know that ADP is going to really skyrocket once we have verification of that, especially if he goes to the Green Bay Packers or the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think you have to like sort of the contingent play there with that wide receiver. Hawkinson is the tight end. That one gets the overtime stamp of approval. And then at running back, we have Breece Hall in the 5th. And then not another running back until you get this Ramondre Stevenson, Rashad White, Marlon Mack string from rounds 12 through 14. Colm, what are your thoughts here on these 2 builds? One is built around DeAndre Swift. The other is built around Breece Hall. They both have strong QB play. And then we absolutely love, especially the early round wide receivers.
Yeah, they've really stocked up here on wide receivers on both these rosters. And there are a lot of the guys that we like to draft. I know, Cooks and Lockett been more veteran presences, but the Jefferson Higgins Jeudy combo with Mooney, and then I think if you're getting Cooks and Lockett as your 5th and 6th receiver, you're in a really good spot. You did mention earlier in the show, though, that it's unlikely basically to get the value out of the depth of wide receiver strength. So maybe we could have seen this team pivot a little bit more at running back, but if the opportunity was staring them in the face for these guys, I think it makes sense. Swift being the only running back in the first 11 rounds, again in this format, could make it a little bit tricky, but I'm looking forward to drafting some very wide receiver heavy teams over the coming months here as well. And I think some of our rosters are really going to look like this. When we mentioned the guys that we are targeting at the running back position are guys like DeAndre Swift. Breece Hall was on the 2nd roster, and he's in there. And Ramondre Stevenson was somebody we targeted a lot last year as well, and he's on that roster. I think they've also done some interesting builds with quarterback as well. Carson Wentz is definitely not really on my radar this year, but when you're looking at Superflex formats and trying to get that 3rd quarterback as depth, I think pairing him with Wilson and Fields is interesting. But look, we're going to talk about having concerns over other teams' quarterback rooms. We have basically all the rookies on our roster. So there's obviously concerns about our quarterback room as well. But I think both rosters are very strongly built. The other thing I really like, they basically sniped us and stole our two kind of late round tight end targets that we wanted to have, in Albert O and Gerald Everett. So the 107 team, I think, is a really strong build overall. Likewise with the 108, they've gone with Burrow, Tua, then they have Jones in there and Willis. So still a lot of question marks around Tua, but getting a major upgrade at wide receiver, getting Tyreek Hill in there. Then we love Joe Burrow. I think you've mentioned on a few shows recently that he may be going a little bit higher than maybe we think he should in terms of ADP, and that's with us loving him as much as we do. But he did pair him up with Chase as well. So he has the Burrow Chase stack, and he has Hopkins, McLaurin in there. He has Brandon Ayuk, Michael Gallup, and I think, like you mentioned with Watson, like our rookie selections, some of these guys are going to have prime landing spots, and we're going to get giddy, I think, about the ADPs in a couple of weeks. And Sean, you mentioned the stamp of approval. I don't think there's anyone that gets the Sean Siegele stamp of approval this season more than those Hawkinson picks. So I think if I was picking which one of these rosters I would rather be given ownership of at this point in time, I would say the team out of the 108, but both solid builds overall. But again, if you compare it to our roster, and we're usually the wide receiver heavier teams, I think that running back could be a little bit built on. I feel like I'm on Twitter at the moment where I post a team and then somebody tweets back to say your running backs aren't strong enough. But I think both these teams are looking pretty good, and I can see what they were setting out to achieve to do here.
Yeah, Colm, you don't want to be that guy who's
running
back's not strong enough. I mean, that's not even a thing, is it?
We can't let Denny Carter see this clip anyway, or I don't know what we're going to do. I was talking and then I was like, am I saying this? But yeah, it was. So yeah, we'll just say that their rosters look really good at this point, but they need more running backs.
Well, you blew it there. No, we do have a running back heavy / balanced build then out of 12, and we won't give away the specifics, but this is one of the best ball drafters in the world making this selection, this team. So kind of a fun one to check out. We go with Christian McCaffrey in the 12th pick there. I mentioned that some of those quarterbacks that you're getting in the second half of the first round, I'm a little bit more skeptical of, even though it's Superflex and you do feel pushed into that. CMC in the first round, I like. Obviously, you're getting him at the 112, even if there are reasons, because most of those picks in front are QBs. You have to feel good about that. And he comes back with Matthew Stafford there at the turn. So again, very understandable to get Stafford. You have your Super Bowl winning quarterback there. It seems like he will have solid weapons again in the 2022 season. A very both high upside, but then safe build as well. So you can see just how to start a team here and to make sure you combine those two qualities. But then we're thinking about the running back element of this team. He goes with Akers and Connor in rounds 5 and 6, Pollard and Singletary in rounds 9 and 10. The value there on those picks and the way that it allows you to build a roster around that. Again, when we're talking about it being super flex, we're talking about it being half PPR. I mean, those are different things than when we're talking about a normal PPR draft. So again, you like the foundation, and then perhaps not a surprise that some of these wide receivers are ones we really like. AJ Brown in round 4, Elijah Moore and Juju in the 7-8 turn, and then Rondale in 12. There's an interesting thing about this roster. We had mentioned in the show that when you lose one of those wide receiver slots for the super flex, it does bump up tight end a little bit. But the other element of the tight ends in the underdog format is they don't have the same pop that they do in some other formats. And so you are going to see some drafters wait. He goes with Logan Thomas, Tyler Higbee, Evan Ingram in rounds 13 through 15. We know that there are some downsides to waiting at the tight end position, and yet this is kind of the spread approach, the attack 3 of these guys at very palatable prices. You're not spending much at all when you're talking about rounds 13 through 15. You would need a little bit of a bounce back for Thomas. Tyler Higbee has that role there in the Rams offense, and then Evan Ingram Obviously, we're already starting to get the puff pieces out of Jacksonville on him. Ingram, when it's not an actual NFL football game, is going to look like one of the best tight ends in the NFL. The question for him is, can he build it into the game itself? I really like this build. A lot of the guys that we like, and you can see the combination of balance and upside. It is interesting at QB. Tannehill is the QB2. Baker Mayfield is the QB3. We perhaps don't have a ton of rushing value in the QBs on this team. And there is some question as to whether Baker Mayfield will start really anywhere in 2022. There are several teams that still need a QB. You would kind of expect that unless they are really excited about the QB they take in the draft, that they may still make a move for Mayfield. But Mayfield compared to the rookies is an interesting question. And then definitely some of the other guys like a Carson Wentz and a Jared Goff, those guys are interesting. We're about to look at a team that took Davis Mills as their fourth QB. Mills, it definitely seems like the Texans want to see again. And when they're not going to have a competitive roster and the QB position is not considered to be a strength in this year's draft, it wouldn't be a surprise if they give him another season. At the same time, I think we're going to see some shock selections at the QB during the NFL draft. And so, I wonder about the value of those picks in that kind of QB 25 to QB 32 range if you're not sure that they're going to be the starter and maybe the upside also isn't there.
Yeah, I think we could see some of those guys, like you mentioned there, like Mills, flip, rankings with the rookies over the coming weeks. But it does feel like the Texans do want to give him an opportunity, and he did. We'll talk about it in a second, but he went in the 9th round. But I really think the team out of 12, really, there's so many players in it that we like. Christian McCaffrey in there. I'm not really in on Cam Akers, but then there is James Conner, who I think is in an amazing scenario at the moment, unless things change through the draft. And then Pollard and Singletary are very interesting at the 9th, 10th turn there as well. Mayfield is an interesting pick because outside of a trade, I don't really see any way that he's going to play. Well, if Watson got suspended, obviously is another way. So we'll see how that one works out. Do you think
there's any potential that he's still there with the Browns because the Browns are actually planning for a suspension of half to 3/4 of the season?
Yeah, that's what the other thing I was just going to kind of mention when I said about unless there's a suspension, because that's really the only way I can see him starting. I could see him getting traded out. The Browns don't seem to want to do that. And if they were going to do it, it would seem like the time to do it would be before the draft or during the draft to get some return on investment this year probably. But we'll see how that does play out. But I do like Tannehill as a quarterback option this year. And I know Stafford really doesn't have any rushing upside, but Tannehill from time to time we do see it from him. He is also paired with AJ Brown, so they have that stack for the Titans there. Juju with the Chiefs is an interesting pickup, and we're very excited about both Elijah Moore and hopefully, we're excited. We've seen some stuff from Elijah Moore last year. We didn't see a huge amount from Rondell, but hopefully we'll see some from Rondell Moore this season, and he went in the 12th round. Tight end is something that's going to be a little bit patched together, but Shawn, we kind of talked about this when we talked about our own draft. We were kind of giving up the position a little bit of quarterback with the hope of really stockpiling the talent, up until we got the rest of our quarterbacks. And with this team, they've really stockpiled talent up until the point that they've gone for tight end. So going late round tight end with this one with Thomas, Higbee, and Ingram, a lot of question marks there. But again, like you mentioned, not the upside of the tight ends over at the FFPC when you're drafting on Underdog. So I'm intrigued to see how that team plays out as well. I think we were in a pretty sharp room here with some very strong teams. So I think this one is right up there.
It is. And then just to kind of conclude, we had two teams that started quarterback. And if you've been following Blair's work on Superflex and the FFPC, you know that this can be a very effective way to start drafts. When we look at this format specifically, where you don't have a ton of other starters and the QB is such a huge part of it, to have the 3 players there that you can count on and to score a lot of points, it gives you both the floor and the ceiling. And if you do hit on the rest of your picks, you're more or less going to blow away the league. Now, you are going to be a little bit lighter at those positions. And we'll see here with the team that was drafted out of 5. I think this one is really interesting. You and I had the choice of Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. We went with Jackson because we like the overall offensive profile there. We think he could be the QB1. He has the rushing value, which is very helpful in this format, but that does allow Patrick Mahomes to go at the 105. They back that up with Trey Lance and Deshaun Watson. So we have some extremely risky but extremely high upside picks. So you look at this from a tournament perspective. If Trey Lance is the starter, and he's going to be the starter, right? There's no way they can come back with Jimmy Garoppolo. I like Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm in the same boat there with Kyle Shanahan. I think that Garoppolo should be a starter somewhere. You look at Garoppolo or Baker Mayfield, as we mentioned, as the starter with the Carolina Panthers. I think that makes you a lot more excited about DJ Moore as the guy. And, even though we haven't been picking him in early drafts, I still have a ton in Dynasty. That portion of it interesting, but Trey Lance there, he's got the massive upside. And then Deshaun Watson, obviously the potential to finish as the overall QB1 if he plays. I have skeptical about that, but also have absolutely no idea how that will turn out. So then because of some of the risks there, Davis Mills does go to this team in round 9. That's tricky because some of the other positions don't have maybe the depth that you would like to see. Now, the starting lineup, still very, very good. You have Alvin Kamara, Elijah Mitchell, Kareem Hunt, and Miles Sanders. A lot of firepower at running back, especially if Kamara is able to play this season. And then you have Amari Cooper, Marquise Brown, Robert Woods, Jacoby Myers, Jamison Crowder, Donovan Peoples-Jones at wide receiver. I'm not necessarily in on those guys outside of Marquise Brown, but you can see where they were a good value relative to where they went in the draft. And if what the fantasy community overall believes about those players plays out, that team will look good at the wide receiver position, depth really being the thing that will come into play there. And then at tight end, you have George Kittle and David Njoku. Kittle, again, it jumps right back to this question of, what is going to be the situation there with Trey Lance. So we have some synergies in that if Lance really pans out for this team, that will be a rising tide that should help George Kittle. Now, a lot of the thesis with Lance obviously is with the legs, but he needs to have a good season there as a passer taking the step forward. That'll help George Kittle. This team fits together nicely. I think that if you're going to take that risk on Lance and Watson, though, you're basically saying, these guys are going to play, maybe use that round 9 pick somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I would be trying to change in this team. If you are going to start and try and get those 3 quarterbacks in those first 4 or 5 rounds, I think then you'd probably need to just seal the deal and go with a 3 quarterback build, and you kind of want to be getting guys that you're pretty sure are locked in and ready to go. So I would have some concerns over going a 4 quarterback build with so much invested in those first 4 rounds. And then Mills, like, again, you could be putting that 9th round pick into other positions that you can go with. But I do like having Kittle there. I'm still not set on David Njoku, but he has all the athletic capabilities. Whether it all ever clicks to him to be an elite tight end at the NFL level remains to be seen. And then some question marks then around the wide receivers with Cooper, Brown, who I think will both be fine. But then Robert Woods coming back of injury, Myers, who is in a relatively low volume offense, and then Crowder, who we do think is in a good spot, but we're down then to Donovan Peoples-Jones. So I think there's a lot of question marks. The other thing was the question marks around Kamara and his off the field situation. I still think there's a chance that the Eagles draft a running back, so that could hurt Sanders. And then you have Hunt, who is already in that competition with Nick Chubb. So we'll see how it plays out, Sean. But really fun draft over at Underdog, and really fun then to have a recap of the teams. But did you enjoy that clip? Make sure you hit that subscribe button to get more content from RotoViz. And of course, you can check out full-length podcasts at rotoviz.com/podcast. Available on all podcast platforms. Check out our wide range of content. Once again, rotoviz.com/podcast.